of the State of Palestine to the United Nations. Well, welcome to you, Ambassador. Let me start by asking you this question. Do you see any future for Gaza after this war that includes Hamas in any form of power?
So it's for Palestinians to choose their governments, and what we saw from the Israeli response to the Biden speech is the wish to continue the war, continue killing civilians, continue in its attempt to designate who it wants to govern Gaza under their own authority and its ability to continue invading and occupying our land. That is not possible. The future we see is one where we have a real prospect for Palestinian freedom, and that our people will be offered finally that right and that choice. And we are confident that our people as a whole will adhere to that choice.
I mean, with respect, the question I asked you is whether you think it would be right for Hamas to hold any power, not what the Palestinian electorate might think. But what do you think?
I think that you have a Palestinian government that should have authority over the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, including East Jerusalem. And I think that Israel has done everything to undermine the Palestinian leadership and government that are willing to make peace as long as the occupation ends. Israel considers that the existential threat is the Palestinian state, and that is a big mistake that has led to all this ordeal. It's Palestinian freedom who will bring shared peace and security to our region.
Okay, but by Palestinian government, you mean the Palestinian Authority, or do you mean Palestinian Authority on the West Bank and Hamas in Gaza?
I mean the PLO and the Palestinian Authority.
Okay, so you agree then that Hamas can have no leadership role going forward in any governmental sense in Gaza?
I disagree with the fact that we're ignoring Israel's responsibilities, and I disagree with the fact
I'm going to come to that, but I'm just asking you directly.
Okay,
it seems to me you've already answered the question.
The state of Palestine, the state of Palestine is represented by its institutions who are committed to international law and who are committed to a two-state solution in which an independent and free state of Palestine lives side by side with Israel.
Okay, but just to be clear, that can't involve Hamas in any governmental role.
You know, you keep saying Hamas. I'm keep
because they're the current government of Gaza.
I keep telling you that there is a Palestinian government that is ready to take up its responsibility tomorrow if it is allowed to do so.
Yeah, but the government in Gaza remains Hamas until it changes, right?
And you think that Israel had a problem with that, or that Israel?
No, I'm asking you whether you think Hamas should have any governmental role going forward. You don't seem to want to answer the question.
I'm answering it. I think a single Palestinian government, which is the one recognized by the international community, which with the state of Palestine.
Right, but why are you reluctant to say it can't include Hamas?
Because we're proposing to have a Hamas within the Palestine Liberation Organization as long as they are committed to the platform of the Palestine Liberation Organization.
Why should, all right, so now you want, so you're saying you want,
people,
all right, so you want Hamas to be part of it.
People.
Right, but if you're Israel, why on earth would you allow any peace deal to resolve this war if people like yourself, senior members of the Palestinian side, come out and say, actually, we think Hamas should be part of a government going forward? Hamas are the people who committed one of the worst terror acts in history. They killed 1,200 people. They wounded nearly 7,000 more. They kidnapped 250 people, including babies and Holocaust survivors. They can have no role in any future government of either Gaza or the West Bank. You must surely understand that. Otherwise, why would Israel ever accept a peace deal?
Let me challenge your premise, and let me challenge the prejudice behind it. Because this is, we have to deal with
prejudice against terrorists.
No, I think there's I'm not saying only you. I think there's a general prejudice of tolerance, or a relatively high level of tolerance when Palestinians are killed and no tolerance when Israelis are killed. I think there's always justifications. Oh, you know, the Israelis had to endure the 7th of October when no justification could be given to the suffering that the people have endured before the 7th of October or after the 7th of October. That's a general prejudice where we are not considered as equals. If we have to deal with the people who are now massacring our nation, who have killed 36,000 people, including a majority of women and children, if the Israeli government today has extremists within its ranks, and still the world wants us to find a certain way of remaining peaceful and finding ways to peace, I mean, you have to accept that we deal with our society in its complexity and diversity, and we need to convince people, not kill them. We need to find a way to convince people on both ends that peace is the way forward. And if you are able to justify Israeli militarism, then you cannot demand Palestinian pacifism. We are coherent with ourselves. We call to end the cycle of violence. It's not to address the root cause of violence, which is the Israeli occupation, and to make peace. And then we don't think it would be relevant to which faction you belong. We believe the Palestinian people will adhere to that vision as long as they see a path to it. And the fact we keep talking about Hamas, instead of talking of these realities, I want to have a thoughtful, mindful conversation with you. It's not a got you moment that you're going to get here. We are very clear about the principles we adhere to. We don't have a finger on the trigger. The Israeli government has its finger on the trigger. We are not killing Israelis. The Israeli government is killing Palestinians. That's not a group in Israel. That's the government of Israel. Today, you have a recognized Palestinian government. You have a recognized Palestinian leadership who says it is ready to make peace now, based on the two-state solution and the international consensus, based on international law. And Israel is rejecting it. You can say Hamas 300 times. It doesn't change that reality. They had a partner for peace. They did everything to undermine it. They want to sow division among our ranks. They want to create civil conflict among our ranks. And we're not going to play into their hands to justify their assault and their massacres against our people by saying Hamas, Hamas, Hamas. That doesn't work. They are an occupying power. They have responsibilities. They have obligations. And no, their violence, not a single piece of their violence is justified. If we are demanded in the face of 7,000 Palestinians killed in 15 years to remain peaceful, then Israel should have been peaceful after the 7th of October and found a way to end this conflict once and for all, where nobody will be held captive, where no civilian would be harmed, where the occupation would end and two states would live side by side.
You see, a lot of what you said, I agree with. You know, I do think you've got to get to a two-state solution. They've got to live peacefully side by side. It has to be a political solution in the end, as all these things are. My issue is if I'm on the Israeli government side and I see senior Palestinians advocating for Hamas to be part of a government going forward, you can't ignore Hamas. Hamas are the people who perpetrated the massacre, and that was an existential threat to Israel. Hamas's stated charter is the eradication of Israel. They make no pretense about it. They want to destroy Israel. So why should Israel allow, going forward, notwithstanding a lot of the valid criticism you make about what Israel has done by way of its response, and I can come to that in a moment, but notwithstanding that, you can't just remove Hamas from the equation. The moment Israel thinks Hamas is forming part of a government going forward in a post-war Gaza, it's a non-starter.
First, I said clearly, anybody willing to adhere to the platform of the PLO, which is in line with international law and UN resolutions, and a Palestinian state on 67 borders next to Israel. So there are criteria to our ability to work together in that stance. But again, you're ignoring the Israeli platform. You have an Israeli prime minister who people welcome and talk to.
Well, you haven't asked me what I think about that. Why don't you ask me?
You. I'm saying,
you might get pleasantly surprised, because I happen to agree with you that the Israeli government right now seems to have been completely overrun with extremist ideology. You know, from Smotrich and Ben-Gvir to Netanyahu. Yes.
But do you agree with me? Do you agree with me
yes.
they're not treated the same way?
I do. No, I do. I don't think Netanyahu should remain in power after this war. I don't think his more right-wing lunatic element in his government should remain in power.
Do you think he should be killed? Should Smotrich be killed? Should Ben-Gvir be killed? Should all these Israeli generals committing massacres against us be killed? Should we respond? Should we leave unanswered the killing of 36,000 Palestinians, the destruction of the entirety of Gaza, the colonization, the settlers, violence against our people, the displacement of communities? Should we leave all that unanswered? How our people are going to be secure? Don't we have a right to safety? Don't we have civilians that should be protected?
Yes, you do.
Exactly. So if you apply the rationale that you have applied, and the media has applied, and the governments around the world have applied on the 7th of October, then we could justify violence, very strong violence against the Israelis.
But it sounds to me,
and we came and
okay,
we
but it sounds to me, and correct me if I'm wrong,
liberation.
Ambassador, correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds to me like you're trying to find a way of justifying what Hamas did on October the 7th. That it was part of
No,
the
I'm not. I'm
part
not,
of
I'm
the
not at all.
so-called
I'm not at all.
resistance. That because of previous violence.
I'm not. Listen, there's the limit. You have to draw a limit somewhere. Harming civilians is the limit. It applies to everyone. Harming civilians
but
is
you
not
do
acceptable
condemn
under
what
any
Hamas
right.
did.
You see, so we're going to go down that line of questioning again.
Yes.
And I'll take this, since we have a bit of time. Usually we try to, answer.
I'm not trying to gotcha you. I think
situation.
you've made a lot of very good points.
No. Since you're giving me the time, let me explain why you didn't get anyone to answer that question, if you allow me to do
Some
that.
people did.
I told
some
you,
people did.
I told you. No, I mean, again, let me try and explain. If we had adhered to that line of questioning, the first question would be, would you condemn what happened on the 7th of October? Whatever you say, yes or no, the questioning is not going to end. If you say yes, then they're going to ask you, do you consider it as terrorism? If you say yes or no, that line of questioning is going to continue. And by the time you're done, the interview is done, and you haven't spoken of the ordeal of our people. And you have somehow found yourself justifying the Israeli response to it. I do not accept a terrorism framing. I'm very clear with you. I reject a terrorism framing. In the UN, I'm a jurist.
How would you frame it?
I will tell you. There is no definition of terrorism. And the reason is you have countries who came from decolonization.
Well, it's the killing of innocent civilians for political gain.
There's no definition. You can check.
Well, that is a definition.
There's no agreed upon. No, that's your definition. There's no.
No, that is the definition.
Let me get to. You'll get the point that I'm making. Again,
okay.
I'm a very blunt person.
Okay.
I'm a very blunt person.
I appreciate
I'm not scared
that.
of any question.
So am I.
And I can respond to any question you have. The reason why states cannot agree on a definition is that people don't want struggles against colonialism, liberation, apartheid, etc., to be tainted as terrorism, and thus, by confusing the justness of the means you are using and the justice of the cause you are defending, to delegitimize these struggles. And then you have on the other side states, including in the Western Bloc, including Israel, who say a state can do anything, can do exactly what you just defined, and can never be accused of terrorism, because terrorism can only be done by armed groups, not states. That's why at the UN till now, we have agreed on everything except the definition of terrorism. The terrorism framing means you have to kill the terrorists. That's the only way out. If you accept a conflict framing, then you need to end the conflict. That's how you resolve the violence once and for all. Israel wants to replace the conflict framing by a terrorism framing, and then wants to expand the definition of who's a terrorist to anybody in the Palestinian people. How many times they said Palestinian prisoners are terrorists? We had 1 million prisoners in 70 years. So all of our people are terrorists. They call our diplomacy terrorists. They call our NGOs, the most prominent human rights NGOs, terrorists. Now they're calling the UN terrorist supporter, and they want to make the UNRWA terrorists. So once we accept that framing, we've set the stage for the indiscriminate killing of Palestinians. This is an occupation. It doesn't mean that you can harm Israeli civilians when I say that. There's no right to resistance that allows you to harm civilians. That's not the way the international law works, and we are abiding by international law. But it means that the solution is not to kill more people. It is to break the cycle of violence. It is to sit and make a peace agreement that liberates the Palestinian people and ensures the peace and security for all. That is the only way out. And you have to recognize the humanity of the other. And for many reasons, personal, that we will not dwell into, I am immune to hatred. There are reasons in my personal story that makes me immune to hatred. And I'm far away, and I'm privileged, and I haven't suffered much of the suffering my people have suffered. If you could see into my soul the level of anger that takes every fiber of my being so it doesn't turn into hatred that would misguide me or rage that would blind me, I can understand how people can go crazy seeing their kids killed, seeing people under the rubble having to be displaced from one place to the other, being bombed, besieged, starved to death, and the world still demanding of them that you should do something different. Israel will kill Palestinians, whether they're peaceful, whether they're violent, whether they're tall or small. They will continue killing Palestinians because what they reject is our identity, is our nationhood, is our statehood. And they're not being very discreet about it if you just listen to them.
Ambassador, I appreciate you joining me and being so frank. Thank you very much.